3, and I, okay, just a moment. It's now 4:03, and I will open the meeting of the Facilities and Community Relations Committee. Today is May 24th, and we have 3 members of the committee, myself, Robert Miller, Trustee Veronica Gallardo, and Trustee Peter Hasland. And I see Peter's screen up, but he's not present at the moment, but I assume he'll be back in his chair shortly. We only have one agenda item tonight, but before we get to that, I will ask if we have any public comments. I
I
don't
did
see.
not receive any comments via email.
Okay. Okay, and I don't see anybody else from the public on the meeting, so I think we can go straight ahead to item 1, which is going to be, I believe, a presentation by Dr. McLarney with True North, but I do not see him on the.
He's here.
He's here?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, there he is.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So
And I'm assuming that you're going to essentially start the discussion of your polling results.
Yep. How's that? Can everybody see
And
it?
yeah, before you start, I'd just like to say, having now spent a bunch of time with it and gone through it and tried to understand it the best I can, that I was really pleased with the work product.
Right.
I've seen a number of polling summaries, results in my professional life, and I thought this was really well done. I thought it was almost elegant the way it tested the impact of positive and negative information. We could see how that affects the polling results from your initial questioning, and gives us a lot of rich information, I believe. But with that, I'll let you take it away, Dr. McLarney.
Thank you very much. And I apologize at the outset. My voice is going to be a little messed up, and I'm not exactly wearing business attire. I, despite being vaxxed and boosted, managed to catch COVID on a flight on Friday. And like the last time I got this, which was very, very early in 2020, it is putting a beating on me. So, so I might be a little hoarse. I might cough and sneeze a little bit here and there, but I think we'll get through it. So let me go ahead and jump in. Before we talk about the results, helpful just to remind ourselves what the purpose of the study was, as well as the methodology we use for conducting the study. In terms of the purpose, we're really just trying to understand is it feasible if the college were to place a bond on the November ballot for that measure to be successful? Sometimes we do this kind of polling, and no matter how we look at the data, there's really no path to get you from where you are today to where you need to be viable on election day. And so if that were the case, I would tell you. Assuming we do have feasibility, that second bullet kicks in, where we're trying to understand how would you go about structuring a measure in a way that it's consistent with type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. Excuse me. There's a lot of components to a bond package. There's the expenditure plan, how you're going to spend the money. There's the price tag, both the aggregate bond amount as well as the tax rate. And so there's all these pieces of a bond package that are decisions you're going to have to make as a board before you choose to place on the ballot. The survey can help guide that. And then thirdly, it's an opportunity for us to understand the importance of information and helping voters come to an informed decision about your proposal. We tend to find that well-informed voters are more likely to be yes voters. If a voter doesn't know much about a proposal in front of them, they misunderstand it in some way, they tend to default to a no position. And so the survey can give us some insights there as well. In terms of methodology for the study, conducted the data collection in May of this year. And the reason why I kind of stop on that is because there's been a lot going on in terms of the past few months with, inflation hitting all-time high or 40-year highs, Ukraine situation with Russia invade Ukraine and what that's done to gas prices. We still have the pandemic with us, as I'm personally learning. And, these are all kind of storm clouds, right? These are things that we'd rather not be in our atmosphere at the moment, but they are. And so those storm clouds and, are kind of in voters' minds as they're answering these questions. So we don't have a situation where, we poll in fair weather and then all of a sudden inflation takes off and gas prices spike and, Russia invades Ukraine after our polling. All of those events had occurred and were in voters' minds to some degree when they were taking this survey. We had contracted, I believe, for 600 interviews. We wound up completing 754. So we went overboard on terms of the vote total, the interview total. We have to all, when we're using a mixed method approach, we have to make some educated guesses about what we think the participation rate is going to be. We tend to err on the conservative side. And, the good news is that the extra 154 interviews are just extra interviews. They're going to allow us to have a greater degree of reliability on the polling data. There's no additional cost to the college. Once individuals were sampled using what's called stratified and clustered random sampling, which guarantees us that at the end of this process, our sample is a match to that likely November universe on all the dimensions that we know are related to voting behavior, things like age and gender and partisanship and household party type. We recruit using 3 methods: email, text, and telephone. We allow them to participate online or by telephone. Survey was conducted in English and Spanish, just depending on what the respondents' preferences were. And now, because this was a random sample of 754 and not a census of all of your likely November voters, it has what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. And in this case, that's plus or minus 3.6%. What that means is we can be 95% confident that the results I'll share with you today are within 3.6% of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your likely November voters. Okay, on to the results. So we open up the survey with our importance of issues question. For each of the issues you see on the left side of the slide, we simply ask voters to tell us how important is this to you. Is extremely important, very important, somewhat important, and not at all important. These are asked in a random order, but are sorted from high to low here based on that combined percentage of folks who said it's either extremely or very important. And that combined percentage is shown off to the right. And so what you see is that, the number one issue with your voters is addressing homelessness. You had 81% say extremely or very important, followed by protecting the environment at 79, and then ensuring local access to affordable, high quality college education and career training, number 3 at 76, on down. One of the reasons why we ask this question is we want to get an understanding of how things that are related to your measure, like ensuring local access to affordable, high quality college education and career training, how those stack up against the issue of preventing local tax increases, which is right here. Kind of a rough rule of thumb, but if what you're proposing to do or build with your bond proposal checks in higher, right, on the important scale than preventing local tax increases, and if that gap is significant, that's a good thing, right? That means you're positioned better to be successful with some type of bond or tax measure related education. If preventing local tax increases is viewed as on par or perhaps even more important than the topics of education, that could be a problem. And what we see here is the gap here is 47% versus 70. It's almost, it's about 27% right here, 76 to 49. That's good. That's actually a little higher than what we've been seeing the last couple cycles when it comes to the broader topic of education. One other thing I'll point out, though, is if you look right here at this item, repairing aging classrooms and facilities at local community colleges, that only checked in at 49%, right? Quite a bit lower than that item there above about ensuring local access. And so I point that out not because it's unusual, it's actually very common, but it is a reminder to all of us that if you're going to march forward with a bond measure for November, at the end of the day, voters don't care so much about buildings and facilities as they care about what those improvements to those buildings and facilities are going to enable you in terms of your core mission of educating students. And so we always want to be connecting the dots for them from what the bond's doing and why it ultimately matters. Okay, so from this point, we go right to the initial ballot test. And the idea is before we get any deeper into the interview, start talking in more detail about possible tax rates that could be associated with this bond, arguments, pro and con, the types of projects could be funded. We want to present to them a mock-up of what we think that 75-word ballot statement could look like and get their reaction. it's a really good gauge of where voters are at on the natural with respect to this proposal. And you can see here that we tested a measure authorizing a $370 million bond, levying approximately 2 cents per $100 assessed value. That's like a $20 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate, raising $20 million annually while bonds are outstanding. So that was the language we tested. And here are the results. At that initial ballot test, we had 66% of respondents tell us they would support this proposal. We had 27% who were opposed and the rest were unsure. So for a Prop 39 bond to be successful in the state of California, you need 55%. So we're sitting about 11 points above that 55% threshold that's needed for success. So that's a good starting point, certainly. So after that, though, we get to the tax threshold section, and naturally, voter support for a bond measure, any type of tax proposal, can depend in part on the price tag. And the higher that price tag is, all of the things being equal, typically the lower the level of support you can expect in the aggregate for your proposal. And one of the goals of this survey was to make it very clear the bonds mean taxes, in case for some reason they didn't pick that up in that 75-word ballot statement. But it's also an opportunity for us to understand that each of these tax rates here, $20 per 100,000 assessed valuation, 15 and 10, what level of support, when you kind of put the blinders on a respondent and focus their attention on the tax rate, what level of support we can expect. And you can see it at $20 per 100,000 of assessed. We check in, support drops a bit, right? We're at 53% support at that level. At $15 per 100,000, we're at 55. At $10 per 100,000, we're at 63. Now, this tends to be a very conservative read on voter support for your bond proposal for a couple of reasons. Number one, we are focusing their attention on the price tag. We are not embedding that price tag in that larger list of projects and improvements that are the benefits of this measure, right? So we're kind of focusing on the costs. The second thing, though, is we know that when you say, this measure will cost your household $20 per 100,000 assessed valuation, not everybody knows what that means. Some voters are going to be confused by that. They may not know what assessed valuation is. They may not know what the AV is on their property. They may have a difficult time doing math on the fly in the space of an interview, which is understandable.
Yep.
And so what happens in those situations is they'll hedge. They'll say, no, we're not sure. So we also come at it a different way. We say, all right, if you knew on the left that, we put it another way, if you knew this would cost a typical homeowner in your community $139 per year, would you vote yes or no? The $139 per year is that $20 per 100,000 of assessed valuation tax rate multiplied times the median AV for a residential property in your district. That's how you get to 139. And what you see is that when you go ahead and do the math for folks, you do get a better answer, right? When we were on that last page at $20 per 100,000 assessed, we had 53% support. When you roll forward and say, well, that's $139 per year, we're up at 59% support. Same exercise on the right where we took the $10 tax rate. That rolls up to about $70 per year for the median homeowner. And you can see at that point, we're knocking on the door of 2/3. So how we talk about the tax implications of this bond is going to matter. And a lot of times when the rolled up number, like what we're seeing here, is fairly modest, that can be a communication tool, right? Normally, you don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the money. You want to focus on the benefits. But you can see here that does seem to help some voters, particularly if you're operating at some of those lower tax rates. I'll take a drink of water here. Okay, so at this point in the survey, we transition to the projects and improvements section. And here, we're going to do two things. We're going to start to educate this respondent more about what this measure will accomplish than what we could only, up to this point, they'd only seen that 75-word ballot statement. So they only had a small list of things that the bond would do. Here, we have to unpack it into all these various improvements and projects. And in that way, they're learning more about this proposal than they were originally. The other thing it does, it allows us to understand of all the things you can spend the money on, which of these are the most attractive to your voters and should be centerpieces of your project list. And you can see at the top, items related essentially to career tech, to instructional technology, to STEM are your top 3, 1, 2, 3. Then you've got hazardous materials, replace outdated electrical, water, irrigation systems, retrofit older buildings for the earthquake safe, bring them up to codes. And so if you go from about here on up, and it's kind of a natural break, what you see is the combination of career tech, STEM, and fixing your older facilities. And that's a very common kind of combination of things that we find voters care a lot about. And we're seeing it here. And so your bond really shouldn't be one dimensional. It shouldn't be all about technology and STEM. It shouldn't be all about roofs and plumbing and electrical. It's really a combination of these things. So this is the second tier of projects that we tested. You can see as you get down to the bottom, there's a couple kind of ahas or interesting ones. Restoring and preserving historical buildings on campus. It's not that it's not popular, but if you stack it up against all the other things that are on this list, voters are less apt to want to raise their taxes to do that. This is your physical education equipment. And so anything related to PE or athletics tends to come in at the bottom of the list. Still, it's not bad, right? It's up around 67%, so almost 2/3 say they'd favor spending some of the money on that. It just means, though, that when you talk about what this measure is going to accomplish, you don't want to be starting in this area, right? We want to be starting on the top tier projects. So, if the board chooses to place a measure on the November ballot, there's going to be an election cycle during which there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate in the community about your measure. We're going to have advocates of this measure that will stand up and communicate to their friends and their neighbors about all the reasons why this is needed and why they should vote yes. We might also get some opposition that steps up and says all sorts of nasty things about your bond and possibly the college and says we shouldn't be doing this. For this to be a reliable gauge of the feasibility of a ballot measure, we need to understand not only where are voters today, which was that initial ballot test, but what happens to their support for your proposal once they've been exposed to arguments on both sides. So we start by testing the positive arguments, which you see here. And lots of good, strong, positive arguments here. Even at the bottom, I think we have over 70% of people say it's at least a somewhat convincing reason to support the measure. But what we often find in these kind of community college bonds is it's about providing local access to high quality education, particularly for students who can't afford the high price of a university, right? And we see those are these two arguments right here. The number one in total was that the college has been a vital resource for the community. It educates the nurses, healthcare professionals who serve the medical needs, police, firefighters, and first responders who keep us safe, and skilled workers who fuel the economy. So we're connecting the dots between the graduates of City College and how those individuals are really serving vital functions within the community. And what's also interesting when you look at this list, anytime we can get a little specific, it tends to do better. So in this one here, most buildings were built between 60 and 90 years ago and have never been updated. And it goes on to talk about all the problems. The 60 to 90 years ago, boom, we get a nice hit from that. When we talk about the fact that the science, physics, chemistry labs haven't been upgraded in 60 years, right, that paints a picture for voters, and that also tests well. So at this point, voters have heard more about the proposal than they did initially at that initial ballot test. We had a chance to talk about the tax rates. That served as a bit of a wet blanket on support for this proposal, as you might imagine. Anytime you're talking about the costs or the price tag, it tends to diminish support. But we followed that up with a conversation about all the projects that could be funded. We conveyed positive arguments, and so we circle back to the interim ballot test, which is shown here. We present them that same 75-word ballot statement. We say, now that you've heard more, where do you stand? And we see that we've got 68% support at this point in the poll. So that's 13 points above that 55% threshold. You need to be successful. 26% opposed, the rest unsure. And then we go to the negatives. And the idea behind the negatives is I'm going to put my opponent hat on, and I'm going to pepper respondents with the types of negative arguments I would expect from somebody who was opposed to this measure and was going to try and convince people to vote no. And as you can see here, we tested a series of negatives. The number one being same number one I've seen around the state in a lot of areas, that this is just a horrible time to be raising taxes. We've got pandemic, high inflation, high gas prices. People are struggling. We shouldn't be doing this. Number two is that it's already a very expensive area to live in Santa Barbara, and this is just going to make that even less affordable. But the real question is what happens afterwards. So we do a good job pressure testing with the negatives. And what you see is the negative cools down a bit, but we still land at 63% support. So that's 8 points above that 55% threshold that you need to be successful on election day. So what does that mean? I'm going to circle back first to that overarching question I mentioned at the outset: is does it appear feasible? Meaning, if your board were to choose to place this on the November ballot, does it have a reasonable chance of success? I think the answer to that is a qualified yes. It's a yes with careful planning and execution, meaning we can't just toss, slap a measure together, put it up on the ballot, and not support that measure strongly and expect it to be successful. I think in politics, as in nature, the natural tendency is for things to unwind, right? And so much of the energy that goes into successful measures is about keeping your yes vote intact, right? It's about keeping our yes voters with us. So why do I come to that conclusion that a bond is feasible? It's because a lot of the things that I want to see for a bond measure to be have a reasonable chance of success on election day, I see in this poll. We saw that voters ranked ensuring local access to an affordable, high-quality education and career training to be among the most important issues facing the community. We see that again and again. We're going to have to connect some dots to how a bond helps that, but that is a strong message, and they care about it. That translated into strong national support for the bond at that initial ballot test. Right out of the gates, we had 66% support. That's 11 points above the 55% threshold. All of the projects and improvements you were considering funding with this bond were popular, and 16 of the 17 were favored by more than 2/3 of respondents. The positive arguments resonated, and importantly, at each point when we circled back to a respondent, even after those opposition arguments, and said, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? All those ballot tests were well above 55. And so those are the conditions that I want to see to say, if you were to place a measure on an upcoming ballot and do the things you need to do to support that measure, I think you've got a reasonable chance of success, certainly. The poll does, however, also point out a few challenges. Tax rate sensitivity. We saw that when the conversation starts to circle around what the tax implications are of this bond, we lose support. The negative arguments get some traction, the ones that we tested. And then there's all these unknowns. They're not unknowns in the sense that we don't know about them. They're unknowns in that we don't know what they're going to do between now and election day. So things like the trajectory of the pandemic. I'm learning firsthand that pandemic is not behind us, right? It's still with us in one form or another. But we also have inflation and high gas prices, which we're hoping can start to come down, but it's been a slow process. We don't know what's going on in Ukraine, and to the extent to which we as a country are going to get sucked into that even more. And then also there's just this challenge of time that Santa Barbara as a county requires that you file a little earlier than other counties. And so relative to your counterparts in other counties, you have less time between now and that point to get going on education and communication and putting together your resolutions, everything else. And so time is our friend if you make wise use of it. And there's, time is ticking here. So last slide, a couple of observations and recommendations just based on the polling. The first is just for all of us to remember that a poll is not a crystal ball looking forward to election day and saying you're going to get 65% on election day. It's a snapshot in time. It tells you where you are today with your voters, how they're likely to respond to the types of information they can encounter during an election cycle. But ultimately, what dictates what happens on election day isn't what your poll says today. It's everything that happens from this point forward. So it's a reminder to us all that we need to make smart decisions when you're structuring this measure so that you're putting in front of voters a measure that they're inclined to support. Right? We are not, I have people sometimes take the idea about a bond measure is that we're just going to build a bond project list based on what our needs are, and then we're going to go sell it to the voters. That's not a winning strategy. The winning strategy is figure out what your voters care about and then build a bond measure around that and then show it to them, and then your challenge is a lot less. You don't have to sell them on anything. You just have to point out that, hey, this lines up nicely with what you told us your priorities are. So in the realm of smart decisions, price tag, I've kept this a little vague here, is keep it in voters' comfort zone. It's probably the most difficult decision you're going to have to make, and you don't want to have to make it today, but it's like, where do you set that tax rate? And it's not as simple as, oh, well, it could be $20 or $19 or $18. There's a lot there. You want to line it up with, the tax rate should roll up to something in terms of what your project needs are. But we did see some, voter sensitivity around that issue. So that's probably your one most difficult question, and the one risk reward proposition that is going to be, I think, the most important to balance right. In terms of project priorities, I mentioned it's really those combination of career tech oriented improvements, STEM, and bringing your older facilities up to speed. The nice thing is that really does match, I think, well, what I heard from you when you talked about what your facility needs are. So you've already got good alignment between what voters care about and what you need to do. And then finally, you've got to put the work in terms of communicating with your voters. I mean, this is not the last step. This is really the first step in an effort to place a bond on the ballot. And if you're inclined to head that direction, it's important that you get going very quickly in terms of district communications to voters to start expand this conversation, start to build some community consensus around a proposal. And then ultimately, there's going to need to be a robust independent campaign that can kind of back this measure and be a voice for this measure during the election cycle, which at that point, the district as a public agency sort of needs to step back, right? It needs to be private dollars, private time. So that's the end of my presentation. I welcome any questions or comments if there are any.
Trustee Gallardo, Veronica, or Peter, do you have questions?
Yeah, Tim, is it Tim or Timothy?
Either. Tim's fine.
Okay, thank you, Tim. My first question is, where did you get the guidance to write up the draft language for the pretend bond that would potentially be on the ballot?
This language right here. So combination of places. Number one, so I'm the one who took the lead in writing that. We did bounce it off a bond counsel attorney to make sure that they were comfortable with the components of it. But when you're writing bond ballot language, you need to make sure that A, it's legally compliant. And so there's certain pieces of this that we have to have in here. We don't have a choice. We have to mention $370 million. We have to mention levying the tax rate, which is 2 cents per $100 assessed value. We have to mention the annual amount of levy, which is $20 million. We have to mention the duration, which is why bonds are outstanding. So you have to have those components in your 75 words. You also have to lead out with projects and be careful about making it too benefit laden. Meaning, if I opened up with saying, in order to make everybody really smart and nice people and save all kittens in the world, that's not something that's connected to the projects in your bond. It's just nice feel good things that people know that voters care about. So what the bond attorneys will make you do is, instead of saying it like in order to improve quality of education, can't say that, but you can open up with a project like repair and modernizing aging outdated classrooms, labs, college and career training facilities. So some of this is required. And then down here, this is really a combination of the things that I expected based on my experience doing this for hundreds of other education bond measures would test the best. That doesn't mean we can't make some changes to it. And there's a couple little tweaks I would consider as part of, now that we've got the poll numbers back, we can fine tune this before you put it on the ballot. But it was really kind of a knowing what I know about your facility needs, knowing what I know what tends to test the best with voters, and knowing what we need to legally have in there. That's how I came up with the 75 words.
There is a question on the actual survey, though, that was not this. And it said something about access to veterans and students. So it wasn't this that they actually answered. It was the other one.
Well, no, well, they answered this. These are all questions that they answer. So this is the initial ballot test. It's usually question 2 or 3, probably question 2.
I guess I'm referring to the one that talked about, those keywords, veterans and access.
Yeah. So the veteran stuff, in some communities we have seen, because community colleges have become really important players in helping veterans transition out of the military into civilian workforce. And in some communities, that's been a very positive draw and attractive feature of a community college bond measure. So we wanted to test it here. It doesn't test as well in your community as it does in some of the more conservative communities, just to be frank. When you get into communities that are, yours is tilted far more left than right. And when you get in communities that are tilted more right than left, you'll see that veteran issue pop a lot more. So here it doesn't pop as much. Where'd that go?
And then my last question was with regard to access, and I'm not surprised to see that access is a priority for the community, and I'm also not surprised to see that CTE, career tech nursing is a priority, because I listen to people and that's what's a resonating theme. My question is, do you know that we have a vaccine mandate on our campus?
I didn't know that offhand, no.
Okay, so that's the biggest issue in our community right now, is that, so for me to see that people want access just reaffirms that the vaccine mandate is something we need to revisit, because as the polling stood, I was hoping to see a question about the vaccine mandate, because that completely changes the game, right? You don't have access right now to the campus. So if you're a construction guy, your guys can't get trained. If you're wanting to start up your own business, you can't go there. If you're trying to learn English, you can't go. And so I think that that's the biggest game changer for us right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a word of caution out here, which is anytime you're doing bond measures, you want to stay away from lightning rods, right? Things that are divisive in the community. Vaccines are divisive. You have some people who they want them gone, right? They don't want vaccine mandates. They should have all this access. And making that change might suit their needs. But on the other side, you have a bunch of folks who really want them, and they want them in place. And what happens is you put anything related to pandemic, vaccines, mask mandates, stuff like that in the middle of your bond measure, and it's going to do this with your voters. Moreover, and just you need to, again, depending on what the demographic balance of your community is, you need to pay attention to who the majority are and who the minority are. And in your case, just based on the electoral composition of your likely voter base, it definitely leans left. And that's the group that tends to want to see these vaccines and mandates in place. So I tossed it out, not because I'm saying one position's right, one position's wrong. I'm simply saying that if we throw vaccines into the middle of this, it's going to have the effect of really pushing people away instead of building a coalition. So we got to be careful about how that issue is treated.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the conflicting message there is going to be that the community college traditionally is a pipeline for higher education, for underserved communities, first-gen students, whatnot. And I don't know, Tim, yours seems to be in analytics and statistics here. So the research that just came out, I believe it was Medi-Cal, Medicaid, and all of the insurance companies just presented all their data to demonstrate which populations and what areas are the folks that did not get vaccinated. Of course, we weren't surprised to learn that it was in fact minorities, low income families, communities that traditionally are served by California Community College. So I think that in the opposing argument right now, and I will be fully honest with you, I'm a board member that will vote no on this bond as it stands, because we have a really big access issue at the moment. And so when we can't have our contractors and our small businesses and startups and shoot ups who generate business and keep our economy going, when those folks are shut out of access to the college, it creates a problem in such a small community that is so tight knit and reliant on a California community college for upper mobility and really job creation, right? So, so thank you. I think that I wasn't surprised with the access priority and the CTE. I do think that there are other issues too. I would have wanted to see some questions around the college's fiscal health, and just to see how folks felt about that. Of course, the public isn't always privy to some of these conversations at the college level. But in my own polling, and I compared your results to the work that Lou Edwards and EMC did for us with Measure S, and that polling came in strong above 55%, and we were guaranteed to get that. At that time, of course, they supported the measure so we could go out as a unified voice and support it and do that. I don't see the support in the community right now. I really don't. And I see it much less than I did back then. Measure S, I was hearing a lot of reasons why the community wasn't ready to support it. And I would say that has more than twofold doubled, I think, now. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out from here to there. So thank you, Tammy. This has been very informative.
Thank you.
Trustee Haslam, do you have any questions,
Yeah.
comments?
I appreciated Tim's expression of concerns, the things that we have to take care of, particularly the notion of, and I trust this is the word of caution of the day: careful planning and execution, and that will. I'm going to assume that that's an absolute. From my historical perspective, what went wrong with Measure S? First, we had a perfect storm. That we didn't anticipate at the beginning. We had an event in Isla Vista in which a Santa Barbara City College student was involved, shooting, and it was dramatic. It was heartbreaking, and I ran into one member of the team who said, we should have withdrawn the bond immediately thereafter because we'd lost. So the environment does matter, and that's an environment over which we have absolutely zero control. We can project all we want, but there's absolutely nothing certain that the assumptions we make today are going to be valid tomorrow. And we should take heart with that. My question, if you and I were to switch places, Tim, and you're a trustee, and based on what you have researched, a two-part question: would you go forward with this? And if so, at what level?
So, unfortunately, I'm not sitting in your seat because it's the harder seat to be in. Just so you know, I get to be the messenger. You have to be the decision makers. It all depends on what happens from here forward, right? Is your board, it doesn't have to be perfectly united, but you do have a strong balance in favor of moving forward. Is there, the will to go out and engage the community at the level that needs to happen before you place this on the ballot, and talk to your stakeholders, listen to the important voices in the community, see what you're hearing back from them too, and also do you have the resources on the campaign side to pull this off and do it well? I mean, November is going to be kind of a lackluster election. November 18 was a huge election, great turnout, lots of additional turnout on the left, lots of turnout from younger voters, and it was a wild success for bond measures. I don't see this election being, there's just nothing that high stakes on the ballot in California to get people really motivated to go at this point, because Newsom already kind of handily defeated a recall. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there who think that Newsom's going to get replaced. So I see the turnout being lower. I see those things, which can work to your advantage, provided you're doing what you need to do to take advantage of it, right? You need to be going out and engaging, making sure, that the folks vote who are on the side of the bond. And so my qualified yes about is it earlier on that last slide when I said it's a qualified yes with proper planning execution, I kind of fall back to that, right? If as long as you are committed to doing those things, then yeah, I think you take a shot. I don't think November of 2024 is necessarily a better environment. If I thought it would be, I would push you there. I would say, why don't you just hold on and go in 2024? I don't know that anybody has a crystal ball that's that good. And, for all we know, it could be worse. So what we do know is when you go out and talk to, 750 of your voters, we have the numbers here in this baseline poll to indicate that you've got a shot at being successful. Now we kind of have to look forward and think about the conditions that we're likely to encounter between now and when you file, and then between when you file on election day, and decide, okay, are we going to be able to navigate all
I think my good friend and colleague on the board, Veronica Gallardo, is 100% half right. And this is not new. We've had this debate any number of times. But I think we counter that argument nicely by saying we cared greatly about the health of students and faculty. And we are now opening up carefully. We're doing this in a systematic way. And I suspect most parents would say, good, that's what we hope to have happen. We more than anything else, we want to keep our kids safe. So I'm not so much worried about that argument. I'm more, my concern is that we will not do the planning part. And the planning part for me comes in the form of being very, very specific to the public about what we will do with their money at their institution. I think our Measure S failed in part because we were nebulous about it. We wanted a certain amount of, well, we wanted a whole lot of leeway in terms of how the dollars were spent. And we weren't sure. This time, I think we have to be sure. And so the question becomes whether to go for a lower amount, say something under 200,000, or something in the middle, or the full 380, as you had suggested. And that becomes the question for which we're going to have to come up with an answer, and pretty soon.
Peter, I
Thank you,
think that
Peter.
the fiscal part of it, that money part is going to be the other argument against, because we've had for a number of years, as we know, significant financial challenges that just haven't been addressed. And because the public is not privy to the closed session behind the scenes conversations that I see and I hear, we all hear, that is my second reason for saying no, absolutely not. There's no way in good faith that I can say to the electorate that we have done our fiduciary responsibility or due diligence to really look at this. I was going through all my documents. Lindsay's like, why does she keep documents? And I was looking through the documents from the campus center at the time when the CPC or one of the college groups recommended that we use some of our unrestricted general fund. And so for me right now, the priority is the PE building and to figure out how we will pay for that. But the financial side of the house, that's not in order yet. And we make a lot of backdoor deals in closed session that the public is not privy of. But because I know what we all say in closed session that will never be public, in my good faith, I will have to say no, absolutely not. Do not vote for a bond at this time until Santa Barbara City College addresses the financial side of the house to make sure that this college is sustainable into the future for all members of the community.
I don't recall a single incident where we made a backroom deal about public funding.
We do it all the time, Peter, with the unions. The public is not aware of what we decide and what we talk about with regard to union deals, races, who's getting laid off, who's not getting laid off, what we should do. We do it all the time. It is the way California works.
I love you dearly, Veronica, but that's not a backroom deal. Those are negotiations that must take place in quiet session. But
yes, they're legal. They're legal. But what I'm saying is the public doesn't know, and because I hear them and I know where financially we have been heading and the things we talk about, and the public doesn't know, because I know and they trust me, I will say, because of what I've heard and seen, I will have to say no.
I understand.
Okay, well, I would like to jump in and referee this debate. I guess I would agree with Trustee Haslund. I'm not familiar with any backroom, definitely not familiar with any backroom dealing, but I'd like to get back to the poll. And Tim, the major takeaway for me, well, first of all, I well understand that this is only a snapshot of time, and we can never predict what's going to happen, but I did take note of your comment that this poll was taken in the midst of storm clouds. That things could get worse, but things are not all that great at the moment. And so I guess I am somewhat comforted that we have, some strong results, not perfect results, but some good results, even though it was taken in this environment. And I note that we start out on the initial ballot of a 66% support. We give them positive comments and it jumps to 68%. And then we give them some pretty tough negative comments and it drops to 63%. So all three of those numbers are doable in my opinion. But I think more importantly, that the poll tells us the kind of positive arguments that will work, that will resonate with the voters, and the kind of negative comments that we probably will hear that we need to be able to address. And I think we can do that with a well-constructed bond measure campaign. I think we can address that and we can stay above the 63% level. At the same time, I recognize that we have to, when we decide, I guess the first step decides are we going to have a bond measure, and the second is the dollar amount. And I was taken by the fact that you had 54% support when you gave them the numbers of $20 and $10. But when you got down to $20 and $15, and when you got down to $10, that the number went up, I think 8 or 9 points. So that's kind of a compelling number to me to be thinking about lower numbers. And finally, I'll just say that as Peter suggested, we've got to communicate what we need. What are the buildings? What do we need to spend our money on, and why do we need it? Why do we need to replace that building? Why do we need the phys ed building replaced? Why do we need to renovate the physical sciences building? So that's our challenge. And let me ask at this point whether Dr. Murillo or Vice President Moss have any comments, questions?
I think the comments I would make, trustees, is the polling came back actually a little bit more positive than I thought it would. I thought it would be somewhere between like 58 and 63 rather than 63 and 68. Maybe because of just my past experiences with this, but I felt that was pretty positive. My recommendation to you would be, if you're going to go with it, that I would go at about 190 million, which would be right at about $10 per 100,000. Okay. I do not think we ought to go higher than that, because I think Tim basically showed us that there is sensitivity to the amounts in the community, and because of the uncertainty right now, it's an uncertain time, and I'm actually glad that we did the poll sort of during sort of a stormy kind of era, because there wasn't any hype of good stuff going on. It's like every day we're confronted with negativity of some sort. So candidly, I sit very much on the fence with this, because I'm concerned that if we lose, and I keep asking people, if we lose, is it really that tragic? And but I have people that say, oh, it would be horrible if we lost again. And I'm like, okay, well, we always just get up and stand up and recoup and do what we need to do. So that's the part for me. I'm a little concerned about I really appreciated what Tim said about the 2022 versus the 2024 election. But, normally I favor a presidential election like would be in 2024. But he did note that he doesn't know the conditions will be that much better for us. So, and that, because we're in uncharted water right now in our country and in the world. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think my major recommendation is stay low, get done what we can get done, run a short bond program so that you're only doing construction for 5 to 6 years.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Is our plan now to discuss this, essentially a redo of the discussion with the full board on Thursday at the study session?
Yes, we were looking to you to sort of decide what you wanted to say at the board meeting in the study session as a committee. That's kind of the way you've been operating lately, as the subcommittee brings, your meeting comments to the bigger board and then have discussion about it. So we were going to bring the slides and have them available for discussion. So I'm looking to this committee to tell me what you want on Thursday night or Thursday afternoon.
Well, I would say I can only speak for myself right now, but my state of mind is very similar to what you just described, Dr. Murillo. That is, I am inclined to want to go ahead with the bond measure, and I'm also inclined to go in the direction of in the area of the $10 per 100,000 assessed value, which I think is equivalent to the 185, 190 million that
Yes.
you mentioned. That is my inclination at the moment. I would like to hear from the rest of the board. I don't want to say that is exactly what I want to do. I want to hear discussion on it, but what you gave as a recommendation is exactly where what my state of mind was before this meeting today, and it's been confirmed after hearing more from Dr. McLarney. And I know that I don't want to speak for Veronica, but she's already told us that she is definitely opposed to it. In fact, would be voting against it on the ballot. So I guess we know where Trustee Viaro comes out, but I would ask you, Veronica, if you have any other comments in that regard. And then Peter as well, after we hear from Veronica.
Kindred, when is the strategic plan? When is that going to hit the ground?
We're working on it now. We will be going out and meeting with community members this summer. So it is ongoing. We've done a lot of meetings at the college already, and then we met with the board already. And so the completion of it will be somewhere, we hope to be bringing you a final sometime in late October, early November.
Because I think that work's going to be important if the committee knows where the college is headed, at least in the next 5 years, 7 years. There's a lot of importance there. And there's differing of opinions, and it's okay. I mean, you've publicly said you support critical race theory, or some people refer it to as the woke curriculum in the community. Be it what it be, if that's the position, at least in some element, that the college is going, and then there's other strategic directions focusing on other things. I think that having that strategic plan is going to allow the community to see where Santa Barbara City College is going. When we were at the conference, they recommended at the diversity, equity, inclusion policies session that California community colleges could begin to put critical race theory into their policies. Great, if that's one direction that Santa Barbara City College, you're going to recommend they go. I think that we at least put it out to the community, and at least people know where everybody stands. As an example, to a side deal that we make with the unions is everybody votes and pushes for a vaccine mandate and masking, yet you're able to cut a side deal with the unions and say, oh, but you don't have to wear a mask. So for parents in the community, we're asking them to add a tax to their property, and we're going to say, we're going to mask your kids because we have this mandate, but on the side, we're going to work out a deal with the unions, and guess what? They don't have to wear a mask. So that's an example of the deals that we cut that the community, it doesn't look good. I want us to be our best and to do better for everyone and to open up this college so that it is truly an inclusive community for everyone. And Peter, I think that the point that said, oh, well, we tried to make your kids safe. Well, unfortunately, Tim, double vaxxed and boosted. I'm sorry, you're ill. And I hope and I pray that you get better, because it's not a fun deal, right? So for us to make nonpartisan decisions, to do what's best for the community, to rally everyone around this amazing college that truly can provide so many opportunities to everyone, we really need to do better and move forward and say, we looked at all of the information available. We want to make sure that we are being inclusive of everyone, and we are making nonpartisan decisions and not being moved one side or the other, because the reality is there are side deals being done. Okay, that is a hypocrisy to see
So-
Cornelia up at the podium, taking off her mask in front of the entire public, recorded on TV, yet everybody else's kid had to be masked. And now we're going to say to the community, oh, can you pass a bond and can we tax your property? But your kid can't come here because they're not vaccinated. And your neighbor, yeah, they can't get the construction tech training they need it. So those are clear, true examples of what's happening in this community. And so it's not that I won't vote no on the ballot, Robert. What I'm saying is when we vote to put this on the ballot, Santa Barbara City College will go out not unanimously, which is not something we want to do, because we want to unanimously say we believe that the community should invest 200 million, 150 million, 300 million, whatever that dollar amount it is. And right now, in good faith, I cannot tell the community that they should invest when we have not allowed them to enter and take part into a college that they belong at. We've shut the door, and that's the truth.
Mr.
So,
Chairman,
Veronica, I don't know, excuse me. I don't know if you noticed this, Veronica, but, and this probably won't change your mind, but I did note that in your district, 81% in the poll said they would support the bond measure on that initial question. There was the highest number of any of the districts. So
Yes, it is true. And you know why, Robert?
I would,
Because Latinos need access to higher education, but Latinos are not taking this vaccine. And so unlike you, I am not retired. And so I have spoken to mothers. I speak to them on a daily basis. I talk to my neighbors. These are men and women that are some of the hardest working community. They're a community of faith. They're hardworking. They believe in values. They're conservative. You look at the churches every Sunday. You go around and ask them if they're taking this vaccine. I have mothers telling me their high school graduates are still sitting at home. So you cannot tell me that you are going to support access, equity, inclusion when you have shut out the majority of Latinos out of that college, where mothers cannot learn English because they can't go to class, where kids cannot go on campus because they don't have a vaccine. Those are things that are unacceptable. That library survey that we just received last week, I am surprised that that was even put up on video for people to see, that we paid salaries for that level of service. And after all of the amount of money we have spent on anti-racism, diversity and inclusion, that is the mediocrity of services we are providing to the community. It is completely unacceptable. And Latinos are waking up. They're not just voting for whatever democratic initiative that's on the ballot when their families are being shut out of this American dream that they immigrate into this country to have.
okay. So let's get back to the issue at hand. Peter, what is your state of mind with respect to moving ahead with the bond measure and the amount of a bond measure?
Well, like you, I'm inclined to move forward. I'm inclined to be conservative in terms of the numbers, and I'm inclined to underscore the need for effective planning. And I mean, Veronica raises an interesting point, and we're going to have to find a way of responding to it effectively. And I think we can. But I also noticed that we had several hands up, like Lindsay and Liz Auchincloss. Maybe they would have something that would change my mind.
I see that now. I'm operating at a handicap tonight because I have this little tiny screen here that I'm looking at, but I can now see the hand raised by Liz. So Liz, go ahead.
Okay, I just needed to correct Ms. Gerardo because there was not a backroom deal made for staff not to wear masks. Staff still wear masks. Many of them prefer to wear masks because they want to protect themselves. So that just was not, that was not true. Staff do not get to go without masks, except with everybody who is outside. So I just needed to correct that because you use the generality of unions, plural, and that's not true. From my understanding, only faculty who are teaching a class can take their mask off during class. That's my understanding, but staff do not take their masks off. So please don't continue with that when it's just not true.
Thank
And
you,
as
Liz.
far as the amount of the bond, I would say go for the smaller amount, just because when we're successful on the bond when John Roma was here, he was advised that he needed to take the lower amount, and we actually were successful. So I would vote for the lower amount myself, but thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So
Thank
I'll
you, Liz.
correct that and for the record, so my last name is Gallardo. And so Kindred, you struck a deal with the faculty that they could take off their masks in the classroom. So it's not all of staff. So the union faculty got to do that. So that's still wrong. And it's hypocrisy. And that's what the public looks at. When someone's at the podium, and Kindred, you have the executive order, presidential order to be able to say, oh, I told her she could do that. Parents took note of that. And it hurt their feelings that their children were masked the whole time. And the comments I got were, so she had the authority this whole time to let my kid breathe, but she only let the faculty do it. It's not okay. I think we can do better, and let's fix it. So thank you, Liz, for bringing that up, because you're correct. It was a side deal with the faculty.
And it wasn't a side deal. It was an MOU that was actually public and approved by the board.
Okay, so it's a memorandum of understanding that was negotiated with the unions, but where was the public and where was their negotiation? Where we work for them. You're paid by taxpayer dollars. We're elected to serve the community, and they want also their MOU.
Okay, I think we're, Lindsay, did you have something? I didn't see your hand raised, but
I put
Peter
it back
thought maybe
down.
you had.
Mine was very, very minor, and it was a logistical point. I just wanted you to be aware of. Trustee Miller, you asked about Thursday's board meeting, and I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
We do not have Timothy McLaurin lined up to come present to that board meeting since he's here tonight. So I just wanted to let you know that
Okay,
that agenda item is just going to be the attachment and potentially you all speaking to it.
okay. Thank you for that clarification. I did not know for certain whether Tim would be there or not. Okay, I think we are done for the evening, unless Dr. Murillo, you would like to hear something else from us, but I think we have given you our thoughts on what we've learned to this point. Lindsay?
I just want to alert us to a chat we're getting from one of our members. I don't think we typically use chat in the board meetings, so I don't know if we want to read it out or let Art speak. Art has a question.
So I'm happy to read it out. And Timothy, I don't know if that was what I was going to make a comment about. You noted the way you did the survey. So he's asking, could you provide demographics of the sample, race, ethnicity, preferred language, property owner versus renter, etc. So
Yeah, I mean, that's possible to do. It's also, the short answer is it matches what the likely November 2022 universe profile looks like. But yeah, that information can be made available.
Okay, great. So yeah, I asked for it the last time I did a survey, just so I could see, how it laid out. So that would be great.
Okay.
One final question. In the data making reference to numbers, whether it's $10 or 15 or 20, did you include the number of years that this bond would hold?
It's while bonds are outstanding is the basic language that the industry is settled on, because we're required to say the duration, but you don't necessarily know how long the duration is going to be at the outset. If your AV growth, for example, goes faster than you anticipate, you might pay the bonds off earlier than expected. And so while bonds are outstanding is the duration.
Is there an estimate?
I don't know what the FA estimated. Usually those are somewhere in the 30-year range.
Even at the smaller amount?
Well, you have a trade-off between length of time in paying them off and that tax rate, right? So if the shorter you make that tax rate, the shorter you make that payoff period, the higher that tax rate is going to go. And so you're probably better off. Standard is sort of a 30-year deal, and that's going to allow you to keep the tax rate at that more tolerable level.
Okay, that does it. Thank you.
So let me see if I just want to note what Lindsay provided me, because we did ask our financial advisor previously about the election scenarios on a term final maturity within 25 years. And at the 6-year issuance schedule, we would be looking at 190 million. If we were going on a 10-year issuance schedule, you could go to 220 million. I again would note to you that I probably would stay below the 200.
Okay.
I remember also when we were looking at the numbers in this poll, again, depending on how fast you take down the money and what the payoff period is, right? You have these variables there. We weren't the most aggressive, if I remember right, in choosing and lining up the bond amount with the tax rate. Like we could have had a $20 tax rate that rolled up to a bigger than a $340 million bond. We kind of took the more modest one. And so because what you tend to want to think about is if voters care about the $10 figure, and that's where you want to set it, then you might want to think about, okay, $10, but let's take the more aggressive $10 figure in terms of what the bond amount could be. Because if then your estimates of AV growth are lower than what they prove to be, you actually can access more funds with that same $10 tax rate. But wherever you set that bond amount, you don't have authorization past that. So usually if you have a couple different variables in there, and if you're going to go for that low one, you might want to think, well, do we want to take that middle of the road number, or do we want to go ahead and set the higher one? And that way we can have the option of selling bonds at that amount as long as we stay within our tax rate promises.
Well, I think you're right that the voter will look at the 10, what's it really going to cost me, rather than for how long they will be charged that sum. But those are answers we're going to have as we move forward. I mean, there's just no reason why we can't have a clear understanding of anticipated questions.
Okay.
But it was interesting that giving the $139 amount got a better result than saying it the other way, the $20. Is that correct?
Yeah, because the 139 is not a big number, right? When you consider it's not an insignificant number, but we work in some districts, when you do the math, they're looking at $300 plus bonds in terms of the median homeowner's going to spend $300 or more a year on the bond. And so 139 is not a lot. The other thing to kind of look at is your $10 rolls up to, I think, a $70 annual impact to the median homeowner in your community, which again, considering you have one of the most expensive, hottest housing markets on the planet, Not a lot of money compared to what the value of those homes are.
Yeah. Well, it looks even better.
The 139 was for,
I was saying it looks even better when it breaks down to a daily rate of 38 cents. I think that's a selling point.
Kindred, my question to
Okay.
Peter's point, with Lori and Measure S, we were working with Lou Edwards and EMC in tandem. I'm still unclear from the inception of all of this. Why are we working with True North in isolation and not in tandem with also like a Lou Edwards, which helped answer some of these things that Peter's bringing up? And I don't know if you remember, Peter, but this is Catherine, who we're working with. And instead of True North, it was EMC, which is a similar consulting firm for polling. This is what's unclear, and it's been unclear, and no one's been able to answer it yet.
So we are out with an RFP right now for a campaign consultant to do the non-advocacy look, so that we can have a further discussion with the board in June. So we'll take the results, we will work with someone, and the committee asked us to go out with an RFP, and we did.
So,
okay,
and then at that point, the bond attorneys are gonna come. Again, it's sort of piecemeal, and I think it's costing the college already a lot more than if it was packaged in the way it should have. And so you may have reasons for that I don't know, but we still don't have,
The reasons why
still don't have all the different components, I guess, that we received last time.
we haven't really had a strong discussion with the board to say they want us to move forward with all the components. And we are being conservative with our funding and not spending money that we don't need to until we did this poll. So that was very deliberate. There was not a lack of planning. It is, we wanted to see the results of the poll before we brought on any more consultants and interchanged any more costs.
Yeah, so that's different from last time. I
that all
guess,
makes sense.
yeah, Lori approached it differently. Yeah.
I'm fine.
It's this,
Yeah, not good or bad, just different as I review the documents.
Yeah, I'm conservative this board, and I try not to spend money I don't need to unless the board tells me they really want me to go and move this further along. And these polling results were important for us to make a decision whether we want to do that.
Okay.
okay, well, I think we've covered the issues that we need to cover tonight. And unless there's objection, I'm going to adjourn our meeting.
No objection.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Matt.
Dr. McLarney.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks.